The Second World War was coming to an end, and the Nazis were facing almost certain defeat. In an effort to conceal the atrocities that had happened during the Holocaust, they ordered the evacuation of Auschwitz. In freezing conditions, nearly 60,000 Auschwitz prisoners were forced to walk in what would later be called a death march. 25-year-old Zofia Stepien-Bator was one of them.
A white road and the large black walls of the forest on both sides.
We could hear the squeaking of the snow and the laboured breathing of the tired prisoners.
Gunshots kept ripping the nighttime silence apart.
And women were constantly thudding into the ditch for their eternal repose.
Then someone ahead of me fell over. I helped her up. She was a tiny girl,
totally exhausted and as completely alone as I was.
Every few steps she stumbled. She had a huge backpack on her back. Get rid of that, it will be lighter, I urged her.
No, I've got bread in there. If I get rid of it, I'll starve to death.
She was breathing heavily and whimpering like a baby.
I threw her bundle to the ground. She wept out loud.
Don't cry, I've got bread. I'll walk with you and I'll share it with you. You haven't got the strength to carry anything.
I learned walking along beside her and supporting her that she didn't have anyone at all in the world.
She was a Jewish girl from the vicinity of Radom. Her parents had been killed.
And she didn't have anyone or anywhere to return to.
She used up a good deal of energy in her lamentation.
In the end, I forbade her to talk or moan. I declared that she would come back with me to my home.
And I wouldn't leave her. I begged her to gather up her strength, to hold out until dawn, because the sun would come up in the morning and that would make things easier.
She calmed down and went on for a while with a regular gait.
And then she fell again. I picked her up.
Now I was dragging her along. Nobody helped me.
Prisoners barely able to stay on their feet were passing us by.
And I had lost so much strength. I was all sweaty from the effort, but I was past the point where I could have left her.
And so we found ourselves at the tail end of the column.
When she fell for the final time and I no longer had the strength to lift her up, I called for help, and somebody's hand took hold of me and pulled me forward.
I was very tired and did not realise I was not going to save that girl, and that I myself could die with her. One of the prisoners, a stranger, oriented himself to the situation, grabbing me up by the arm and pulled me along with her.
A moment later, there was a shot.
It was my poor little ward, whom I had promised not to abandon, and she had stopped suffering. The echo of that shot still rings in my memory.
Over 50 years later, 7-year-old Yasmin Yusufovich was also forced to walk. This time to escape soldiers approaching his home in Srebrenica.
On the morning of that July 11th, the shooting started early, closer than ever before. It was a hot day outside. Mum and Babo were packing up our stuff in cloth shopping bags.
I jumped and packed my school bag with the Little Prince and the encyclopedia. The shelling continued all morning. More and more people started moving out of the town. Running, we were foolishly waiting for something. Then someone from the crowd yelled, "The Chechniks have come down to the marketplace."
We grabbed our bags. My father grabbed me as he would a bag, and we fled from the hill on which our house was located to join the crowd of people fleeing. Behind us, we could hear burst shooting.
While running down the street, I tore my right sleeve on a fence.
The same fence which was blown apart by a grenade that also killed children playing a football tournament in front of our school. I may have cut my arm as well, but I didn't feel it at the time.
Mother took the backpack off my back, shook out my books and looked at me.
I just shrugged. That's how my Little Prince book got left behind.
She consoled me by saying they would have been too heavy on my back while we were fleeing.
I was thinking to myself, maybe they wouldn't have been too heavy, but I kept silent.
Nothing seemed to make sense anymore.
Yasmin and his parents kept moving, hiding out in an old factory to escape the violence. Eventually, soldiers arrived and forced those inside onto buses and trucks.
Father was pushing Mother and me in front of himself. Mother was holding me tight against her, wrapping me in her clothes. It was hard to run like that.
We were passing one, then another truck and bus, all until someone shouted, "Get in!" And I found myself in front of a wooden ladder which was leaned onto the truck.
I thought the sooner I climbed up the ladder, the sooner all three of us would be on the truck, and all of this would come to an end.
Halfway up the ladder, I heard an order shouted behind me, "You, get down, over there." And I heard a commotion.
I climbed up the few remaining steps and turned around. Mother was sitting in front of the ladder, waving her hands, and down the road a soldier was pushing my father with a rifle.
I couldn't see anything else besides the three of us and that soldier.
I went stiff. Father was being forced by the soldier into a ditch by the road, while another was yelling at Mother to make her climb up.
Mother grabbed me, completely petrified, and carried me deeper into the truck. I was still looking towards Father. He was standing in the ditch.
He turned around towards us to see us out. When he saw I was looking at him, he put his finger over his mouth as if to tell me, "Shh,"
and waved his hand as if to say, "Go."
I didn't hear. Maybe we were shouting, but I didn't hear. I remember that I couldn't move a thing. I left my eyes on my father.
I only know I clenched my teeth hard, and inside I wanted to explode.
It made tears come to my eyes that fogged up my view of my father. I only managed to raise my hand up a little bit, and in my mind I thought I was waving to him.
He only repeated that motion of his "shush, go."
He didn't have his usual beret on his head. I thought that maybe he would be hot out in the sun. He was wearing a t-shirt on him, cream-coloured,
with wide azure stripes, a worn-out leather vest, black pants and worn-out shoes, the only ones he had in Srebrenica.
Under his arm, he was carrying my red hooded jacket, and so he stayed watching us go. It was as if someone had taken me, carried me out of the truck and into the heavens. I saw that in the ditch around my father were many more men.
That was the last time Yasmin saw his father. He was one of around 8,000 men and boys murdered in Srebrenica. Their bodies bulldozed into mass graves. When Khmer Rouge forces seized Phnom Penh in 1975, Puk Young Lee and his wife were living in a town with 8 of their children. Residents cheered the Khmer Rouge soldiers when they arrived, relieved to see the end of a civil war that had lasted for 8 years. However, the celebrations were short-lived. The entire town was ordered to leave as the Khmer Rouge forced millions of Cambodians to work as manual laborers in the countryside. Puk Young Lee kept a secret diary, writing that he and his wife had been forced to march for nearly 2 weeks.
Our family reached the village around 9 a.m. on May the 1st, 1975.
As we slept at night at that village, your mother and I heard lots of rumours about how people were brought to be killed in groups.
Your mother and I were very concerned about our safety. We intended to travel further,
but we were worried that we would be killed. Our family moved into a wooden house with a brick shingle roof with 6 other evacuee families.
Together we were a total of 40 people. It was very crowded, and because of our living conditions,
there was a complete lack of basic hygiene. We lived there for 3 months before Khmer Rouge Authority moved our family to a separate place of our own.
The diary was kept hidden in a clay vase. Under the Khmer Rouge, it was illegal to own private property. Anyone deemed to be educated was considered a threat to the regime and imprisoned or executed. In 1976, Pokyon Lee was arrested and later died in prison. But his diary survives as one of only 4 known first-hand accounts penned by victims and survivors of the Khmer Rouge. Despite thousands of prisoners being forced to evacuate Auschwitz in the Death March, when Soviet troops reached the camp, they found it was not empty. Around 9,000 prisoners were discovered, most of them too ill to leave the camp. Alexander Vorontsov was a camera operator in the Soviet military who recorded the liberation.
A gastricide arose before our eyes.
A vast number of barracks. People lay in bunks inside many of them.
There were skeletons clad in skin with vacant gates. Of course, we spoke with them.
However, these were brief conversations because these people who remained alive were totally devoid of strength.
And it was hard for them to say much about their time in the camp. They were suffering from starvation and they were exhausted and sick. When we talked with these people and explained to them who we were and why we had come here, they trust us a bit more.
The women wept, and this cannot be concealed. The men wept as well. You could say that there were pyramids on the grounds of the camp.
Some were made up of accumulated clothing, others of pots,
and still others of human jaws.
I believed that not even the commander of our army had any idea of the dimension of the crime committed in these large of camps. The memories has stayed with me for all my life long. All of this was the most moving and most terrible things that I saw and filmed during the war.
Time has no sway over these recollections. It has not squeezed all the horrible things I saw and filmed out of my mind.
As the Rwandan president's aircraft prepared to land, surface-to-air missiles shot it down, killing everyone on board. The assassination was the trigger for the Rwandan genocide. In just 100 days, 800,000 people were murdered. Jean-Louis Mazimpaka was 17 years old at the time and studying to be a nurse.
When the president was killed, we thought there might be some trouble in the capital, but we had no idea of the scale of what followed. My family is Tutsi, but there was no Tutsi land on Hutu land. People had mixed marriage. We went to the same school, live in the same village, share a language. We hear on the radio that Tutsi were being attacked and that roadblocks were being erected. But we weren't worried for ourselves. We didn't think it will reach where we lived. We were wrong. The killing in my town didn't start until a week after the president was killed. But on the 15th of April, a friend, the husband of the teacher, was killed. People with machetes came to steal from his house and they killed him. Still we thought we were safe and that this was one-off. But the next day in the neighboring town, another teacher and his family were killed and we started to get worried. A friend warned me our family was next. He was part of the militia, but I used to give him medicine from free and we played football together. We took his warning seriously, and that night we stayed with a Hutu friend who had a Tutsi wife. When we went to look our house the next morning, there was nothing left. Everything had been stolen. We went to the church. Refugees started arriving too, mostly Tutsi, but some Hutu. Some had machete wounds. They were crying, hungry, desperate and confused. There have been violence in 1959 and 1973. The churches had been sanctuary then, so people thought they'd been safe. Some of us suggested escaping in the boats over Lake of Kivu to Democratic Republic of Congo. But all the people, including my parents, still believe it will be okay, that we won't be attacking the church. On the 18th of April, the militia arrived and we saw them preparing attack. By then, it wasn't just the militia, it was the rest of the population as well, including the friends who had warned us. Everybody have been brainwashed by the militia to join in.
Holocaust Memorial Day is a day to remember those who died in the Holocaust, as well as the genocides that have taken place since. Genocide is still happening today. Since 2003, hundreds of thousands of civilians have been killed in the Darfur civil war. Millions more have been displaced. Hawa Mohammed and her family lived in Darfur when they were attacked. Many of them were killed. Despite being shot and physically abused, Hawa survived and managed to help her children escape. They have now built a new life in America.
I often doubted that I would survive to see another day, but something deep in my heart was telling me that I would. I decided not to surrender.
Even when I felt exhaustion, thirst and hunger, or when I was overwhelmed by sadness, thinking of the genocide perpetrators' intent to humiliate and exterminate us.
In Houston, Texas, we found a new home and a new life with loving people. I was told that my body had been severely injured by the shooting and that I would never be able to work.
It was hard to believe, but I didn't let that shake my confidence. I was determined to be productive and optimistic, no matter what.
Now that I was living safely in the United States, I wanted to go to school, get a degree,
and be a fluent English speaker. I had never been able to go to school in Sudan because it was not considered safe for girls to go to school, only boys.
I am happy to say that in the last 4 years, I finished an ESL course successfully, did an ACT test, and I am currently working on my GED to be able to go to college.
I'm doing great in my classes and remain a distinguished student, in spite of my multiple responsibilities and health situation.
My children are in college and working evening jobs to support our family. They also play sports and are top-ranking students in their schools. I have also been able to give birth to 2 more healthy children.
My plan for the future is to continue to speak up for myself and other women, to fight against genocide, write a book, and to study law to be able to pursue justice for me and my people.